Tom stood on 1 acre of land in rural Ohio, holding a receipt in his hand. Fertilizer, pest spray, a rental fee for a brush cutter he'd used for 4 hours and returned covered in mud. He looked at that receipt, and then he looked at his garden, and the math didn't add up. He was spending money to grow food that was supposed to save him money. Next door, on the same size property, Nancy hadn't bought fertilizer in 2 years. She hadn't rented equipment once. Her soil was darker, her pest problems were smaller, and her grocery bill was lighter. Same acre, same sun, same rain. Completely different result. So here's the question that's going to drive the next 8 minutes. How did a piece of land the same size as Tom's end up working like it was 10 times bigger? The answer isn't luck, and it isn't a secret fertilizer blend. It's 10 animals, and more importantly, it's what those animals were actually doing when nobody was paying attention. Before we get into it, if you're the kind of person who wants to get more out of the land you already have instead of buying more land you don't, go ahead and subscribe now, because this channel is built entirely around that idea. Alright, let's get into it. Tom's mistake wasn't his soil. It wasn't his climate. It wasn't even his work ethic. Because the man was out there every weekend pulling weeds and hauling bags of compost from the hardware store. His mistake was simpler than that, and it's a mistake almost every new gardener and homesteader makes without realizing it. He was treating his property like a collection of separate jobs. The garden was one job, pest control was another job, fertilizer was another job, mowing was another job, and every single one of those jobs required him to either spend money or spend hours. Nancy's property wasn't structured that way at all, and the first time Tom actually stopped to watch what was happening over the fence, he realized why. He saw chickens moving through her side yard, and at first glance, it just looked like chickens doing chicken things. But watch a little closer, and you start to notice something. Those birds were eating insects that would have otherwise been eating Nancy's vegetables. They were scratching through kitchen scraps that would have otherwise gone in the trash. And everywhere they walked, they left behind manure that was quietly feeding the soil underneath them. Here's the part that changed how Tom thought about his own land completely. Nancy wasn't raising chickens for eggs. Eggs were just one thing they happened to produce. The real value was everything else they were doing for free, all day, without her lifting a finger. That's the mistake most people make when they think about livestock. They ask, what does this animal produce that I can sell or eat? And they stop there. They miss the second job. The job that happens quietly, in the background, whether you're paying attention or not. And once you start seeing animals as workers instead of products, the entire way you look at a small piece of land changes. So Tom made a decision. He wasn't going to keep buying his way out of problems his land should have been solving on its own. He was going to rebuild his 1 acre as a connected system, the way Nancy had. And Nancy walked him through it, starting with the animal almost everybody already knows, and ending with the one thing that ties the whole system together. Number 10 is the chicken. And yes, it's the most familiar animal on this list. But don't let that fool you into thinking it's simple. A properly managed flock hands you eggs, meat if you choose to raise them for it, pest control, and manure. And it does all of that while eating things you'd otherwise throw away. Certain kitchen scraps, garden leftovers, weeds, insects. The interesting question here isn't, should I get chickens? It's this. What if the cheapest animal on the whole property is also the one doing 5 different jobs at once? Number 9 is the duck. And ducks solve a problem chickens can't. If you've got wet ground, a garden bed that stays damp, or a slug problem that won't quit, ducks will forage through it and clean it out. They eat insects and slugs that chickens tend to avoid, they lay eggs, and they leave manure behind just like chickens do. But here's the honest part, because an honest farmer doesn't just sell you the upside. Ducks make mud. They need clean water, and if you don't manage that, you'll trade one problem for another. The best animal for your land was never going to be the one with 0 downsides. It's the one whose benefits are worth the extra work. Number 8 is the goat, and this is where things start to get dramatic. Picture an overgrown fence line, thick brush, blackberry bramble, the kind of mess that normally means renting a brush cutter and burning half a Saturday. Goats will walk into that mess and start eating their way through vegetation most other animals wouldn't touch. But Nancy was clear with Tom on this one. Goats aren't magic lawnmowers. They need secure fencing, because they will find the one weak spot in your fence and they will use it. They need parasite management. They need real nutrition, not just brush. Handled properly though, they're turning vegetation nobody wanted into milk, meat, and manure. And that's a trade worth making. Number 7 is the pig. And this is where the story gets a little more complicated, in a good way. Historically, a family could raise a pig alongside their garden and their kitchen, and that pig would take food byproducts and surplus crops that had almost no other use and convert them into manure and meat. That's an old relationship between pigs and waste that goes back generations. But pigs are strong animals with a serious rooting instinct. And if you let them run wild in the wrong space, they won't improve your soil, they'll tear it apart. So the lesson from this section is one of the most important ones in the whole video. The animal isn't the system, the management is. Number 6 is the rabbit, and this is where the story shifts towards something a lot of viewers don't expect, which is land efficiency. Rabbits don't need acres of pasture. They reproduce quickly, and when managed properly, they convert feed into meat efficiently, in a fraction of the space a larger animal would need. Now, nobody's claiming one rabbit is going to feed a family forever, and if a video ever tells you that, be skeptical. But a small, well-managed breeding group can provide a steady supplemental source of meat for a household, plus manure that goes right back into the garden. And that raises a real question worth sitting with. Could a small backyard actually produce meaningful protein without needing a single extra acre? Number 5 is the sheep, and sheep introduce a concept that's easy to overlook, which is pasture conversion. Instead of mowing your grass and then hauling the clippings to the curb, a grazing animal takes grass that humans can't eat and turns it into meat, wool, and manure, and eventually more sheep. But land requirements don't disappear just because you added an animal. Sheep still need proper pasture, fencing, water, parasite control, and protection from predators. What makes this section interesting isn't that sheep eliminate work, it's that they take something your land was already producing for free, grass, and turn it into something your family can actually use. Number 4 is the bee, and this might be the biggest pattern break on the whole list, because a bee isn't livestock in any traditional sense. Bees give you honey and beeswax, sure, but their real economic weight comes from something most people never think about, which is pollination. That pollination affects how much fruit, vegetable, and seed production the rest of your property is capable of. And that leads to an idea worth remembering long after this video ends. Some animals don't produce food directly. They make it possible for everything else on the property to produce more. Number 3 is the cow, and this is the biggest animal on the list, and historically, the most complete food system a single animal could provide. Milk becomes cream, cream becomes butter, butter and milk together can become cheese, and on top of all of that, you get calves and manure. But Nancy didn't romanticize this one, and neither should you. A cow is not automatically the right animal for a 1-acre property. She needs real feed, real water, real infrastructure, and daily attention, and without enough land or purchased forage to support her, she stops being an asset and starts being a burden. That's the real question buried in this section. When does an animal cross the line from asset to liability? Number 2 is the donkey, and this is the second major pattern break, because this section isn't really about food at all. It's about labor. Historically, working animals hauled supplies, transported equipment, and carried loads across a property without a drop of gasoline. A donkey isn't going to replace a modern tractor on a commercial operation, nobody's claiming that. But on a small homestead, the idea of an animal doing useful physical work without fuel, without a repair bill, without an oil change, is worth sitting with. And it raises a genuinely interesting question about how we got here. Did we move away from working animals because they stopped being useful, or because machines simply became faster and more convenient? The honest answer is somewhere in between. And that brings us to number 1, and this is the twist Tom didn't see coming, because number 1 isn't another animal at all. The real secret isn't any single creature on this list. It's the connection between all of them. A chicken eats insects and produces manure. The garden produces surplus vegetables the household can't finish in time. Those vegetables become feed for the pigs or the rabbits. Those animals produce manure of their own. That manure returns nutrients to the soil. The soil grows stronger crops. Those crops feed the household and the animals both. And the cycle starts over again. That circular relationship, more than any individual animal, is what makes a small property behave like it's much bigger than it actually is. Here's something Nancy made sure Tom understood before he got too excited, and it's something worth understanding too. The order you introduce animals to a property actually matters. Bring in pigs or goats without a real plan, and instead of improving your land, they can tear it apart in a matter of weeks. This isn't a system where you just buy 10 animals and let them loose. It's a system that has to be built in the right sequence, with the right management, or it works against you instead of for you. Tom didn't rebuild his whole acre overnight. He picked one small test section and applied everything Nancy had shown him. Within a single season, his soil was darker, his pest pressure had dropped, and for the first time in years, his grocery bill actually reflected the work his land was doing instead of the work he was doing to prop it up. And Nancy was honest about the limits too. Because none of this works if you pretend it's effortless. None of it replaces the need for solid fencing, clean water systems, and basic veterinary care. Not every animal on this list belongs on every property, and the right combination for a quarter-acre backyard is not the same combination for a 5-acre homestead. The scale of what you can do changes. The underlying principle doesn't. So here's where that leaves things. 10 animals don't magically turn 1 acre into 10 acres. But the right animals, managed the right way, can perform enough different jobs: food, fertility, pest control, vegetation control, pollination, waste conversion, even labor, that a small American homestead can genuinely outperform its acreage. Tom's property didn't get bigger, it got smarter. And that's really the whole point. A homestead's power was never about how many acres sit inside the fence line. It's about how many jobs every single acre is actually doing for you. So, here's my question for you, and I'd genuinely like to know, which of these 10 animals do you already have on your own property? And what's the job it's quietly doing for you that you never really gave it credit for? Drop it in the comments, because I read every single one. If this got you thinking differently about what your land is capable of, do me a favor and subscribe, because next time we're covering the flip side of everything you just learned. The soil and pasture mistakes that can quietly undo an entire system like this one, sometimes without you noticing until it's too late.